Let's get into access control. Yeah. After successful authentication, authorization to use the network resources granted based on access control lists. ACLs. Let's do access control list. Okay, that's an ACL. Now, I have heard trainers, or I have heard people in videos say that ACLs are also referred to as ACLs. And it's like, you know, some of those like Security Plus videos that you'll see out there, and the guy who's teaching it, I don't know what qualifies him for, but he calls them ACLs, and that just sounds so dumb. I I would never do that. Like, first off, if you can't pronounce ACL, at least that's like 3 syllables. ACL, 3 letters. That's just lazy to call it an ACL. It's a fucking ACL. Okay. And the only reason that should never confuse anybody, because if you're talking about an ACL, you're either talking about cybersecurity, like, you know, a network security, or you're talking about a sports injury. Okay. So other than that, like, there shouldn't be any other confusion out there. But anyway, authorization to use a network resource. ACL. Authorization to use a network resource. There are many types of ACLs, okay? Such as those allowing access to, let's just start. Okay. Allowing access to a network. Allow or deny access to a specific resource, such as a file. Or a website. Often done through the use of groups. So groups is a very powerful tool. In some places, I think they used to call it workspaces or something like that. It's a very powerful tool to group computers and resources, users. I think your workspaces groups the computers in a way, like can put the work group, I think is what they used to call it on Windows, work group. And then ACLs are can be for, sorry, work groups I think are for the computers, for the hardware. You go into the operating system and you change the work group for the computer, and all the computers that are on the network that are in the same work group are have that level of access, whatever that group. Regular groups, group policies, GPs, and things like that are going to happen more in the domain server, and they probably apply more to people than hardware. So that's from my experience, but it's a rabbit hole, so we're gonna keep digging. In the real world and on the Server Plus exam, you have to be able to determine which permissions must be set. You have to be able to determine which permissions must be set to accomplish a specific goal. Okay. So let's go to a page 2. So let's make a note of that. Must be able to determine which permissions must be set to accomplish and we're going to do this in a lab coming up, not right away probably, but in a lab eventually as we make our way through the program here. Okay, must also understand permission inheritance and precedence. Okay, so those those two sound kind of important. Inheritance and precedence. Well, anybody familiar with like computer programming or object-oriented programming has the general concept of inheritance. And precedence means like which one is dictated to come before the other. So okay, so let's make this other note. Principal least privilege. Principle of least privilege states that only the permissions required to complete a task should be granted. Okay. And this must always be followed. And the reason being is because, yeah, most of if you're doing everything right, the most likely way your network is going to get hacked is from the inside, usually from somebody clicking on a link or something, or internal sabotage, an accident or an inside person. But, that's if you're following all the right principles of security. Not setting default passwords for your devices and all that stuff, change your default printer passwords from Xerox to whatever, all of that crap, your default router passwords, change all that stuff. And make everything secure enough, make sure you're salting your passwords, making them long enough, putting in, do all that stuff. And for the most part, if you're doing all of that stuff, then you can pretty much guarantee that if your network is cracked, it's most likely going to happen as a result of either an inside job. It's going to be an inside job. It's either going to be, somebody with malicious intent, or it's going to be somebody who does it accidentally. And both happen all the time. So principle of least privilege states only the privileges that we need to complete the task should be granted. And we're going to go over this much later in chapter 6. So what we're going to do now, let's prepare for our next section. Let's duplicate our slide here. And we're going to get ready for 166. Data at rest. So when we come back, let's make that page 1. When we come back, we will finish up this section 1.6 with 166 data at rest, and then we'll get ready to move on into troubleshooting and optimizing performance after that.